As soon as I stepped into the wedding garden, the very moment I expected to see my daughter walk out in her white dress, I froze. Hanging right at the entrance under 2 rows of glowing golden lights was a large board with a photo of me and my husband. Underneath, in bold letters sharp as a blade, it read, "Do not let these 2 people in, by order of the bride." I stood motionless while my husband, Mark, went red, then pale. Guests glanced at us with puzzled looks, but they didn't know one thing. This entire wedding was secretly paid for with my own money, and they also didn't know that just a few hours later, I would destroy this ceremony in a way no one could ever imagine. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Carter, 61 years old, living in a quiet town in Ohio. I never thought my life would lead to a day like this, standing at the entrance of my own daughter's wedding, treated like a stranger, even forbidden to step inside. That feeling didn't even resemble sadness anymore. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out, placed it on a scale, and declared that I wasn't worth a single cent in my daughter's eyes. We had driven more than 3 hours to get there. Mark prepared a small speech, folded neatly and tucked into his suit pocket. I had spent the entire night before wrapping a little wedding gift, a white lace handkerchief my mother left me, a family heirloom. I wanted to give it to my daughter on the most important morning of her life. Every small hope vanished the moment I saw that wretched photo. I turned to Mark. His eyes trembled in a way I had never seen. We'd been married for more than 40 years. I'd seen him angry, exhausted, defeated, but never hurt the way he was at that moment. "Evelyn, what is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, my head spinning, my legs glued to the ground. A young hotel attendant walked toward us, his face full of worry. I'm really sorry. I was instructed that if the 2 of you showed up, we can't let you in. This is a direct order from the bride. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The bride he referred to was Madeline Carter, my only child, the daughter I once held through long, feverish nights, the daughter I worked 2 shifts to pay for through college, the daughter I thought would hug me tightly on her wedding day. No, she chose to hang my picture outside the venue like I was a wanted criminal. Guests passing by glanced at us, some avoiding eye contact, others staring out of curiosity. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a public square, being stoned by the very person I raised. I squeezed Mark's hand. "Let's go," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He nodded. Neither of us said another word. We quietly turned away, each step heavier than the last. Every step felt like another cut to my heart. I heard the wedding music drifting from afar. The gentle violin sounded as if it were mocking my humiliation. When we reached the parking lot, I couldn't hold myself up anymore. I stopped, leaning against the car door, trying to breathe so I wouldn't collapse right there. I didn't want Mark to have to catch me like someone whose bones had just been shattered. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with worry. I pressed my lips together. "Mark, I really don't understand. Why would she do this? Why today, of all days?" He looked at me and shook his head. "I don't know, but standing here won't change anything. Let's go back to the hotel." We got into the car. Mark started the engine, but his hands were shaking. I placed my hand over his, searching for any warmth left in this moment of devastation. As the car rolled away from the dazzling wedding garden, I looked through the window. Everything behind us still looked beautiful, perfect, while inside, My heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the way back to the hotel, I tried to stay calm, but tears streamed down my face. Images of Madeline as a child replayed over and over, her messy blonde hair on school mornings, her bright laugh running across the yard, the tight hug she gave me the first time she earned an A. I once believed those sacrifices would be the bond between mother and daughter. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe when a child grows up with everything, she might accidentally see her mother's love as an obligation. I never imagined I had raised someone who could treat me as a burden. I tried to comfort myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Madeline didn't know. Maybe someone else hung the sign without her knowing. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Madeline knew. Madeline agreed. Madeline wanted this. I remembered the months preparing for the wedding, the moment I transferred $92,000 to the event planner, money I had saved for more than 30 years. I remembered how relieved I felt knowing my daughter would have the perfect day she dreamed of. I hid it from Madeline because I thought if she knew I paid, she would feel embarrassed or guilty. I hid it out of love, out of a mother's instinct to protect. But today, standing forbidden at the wedding entrance, I realized my daughter didn't feel grateful at all. She saw me as a debt, or worse, an embarrassment to hide. The car stopped in front of the hotel. Mark turned off the engine, but he didn't step out. He turned to me. "Evelyn, I know this hurts, but you have to understand. She's not the little girl we raised anymore. She changed when she got involved with the Whitmore family." I looked down at my hands, the veins raised, the faint calluses from years in the laundromat. I had built my entire life around Madeline. I never imagined the child I raised would be the one to push me out of her life on the most important day she had. I inhaled deeply. "Mark, did I do something wrong? Or are we just too poor, too ordinary for them?" Mark placed his warm hand on my shoulder. "No, Evelyn, we didn't do anything wrong, but sometimes being endlessly kind makes others think they have the right to walk all over you." I nodded, but inside me, something shifted, a feeling both painful and cold, as if a new door had opened, and behind it was a version of myself I had never dared to become, a version of Evelyn Carter, who would no longer bow her head. I looked out the window toward the golden lights of the wedding still flickering from afar. "Mark, you know what? I think I've been too gentle." "Gentle?" Mark frowned. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think it's time I take back everything I've given away." He stared at me, trying to read my thoughts, but even I wasn't fully certain yet. I only knew one thing. Tonight, I would no longer be the woman who endured humiliation in silence. A frightening yet clear idea began forming in my mind, slowly, quietly, but powerful enough to make me shiver. If Madeline wanted to erase me from her life on her most important day, then I could show her exactly who held all the real power over this ceremony. And I would not shed another tear. I sat silently in the hotel room, my eyes still slightly swollen after hours of holding back tears. But as memories flooded back, I no longer felt humiliated. Instead, I felt hollow, as if an invisible hand was opening each drawer of my past, forcing me to look closely, from where I started to the moment I lost the very child I raised. I was born in a tiny town in northern Ohio where winter winds blew so cold the window glass froze every morning. My family was poor, not the kind of poor where you skip a few luxuries, but so poor my parents burned scrap wood and cardboard to keep us warm. I grew up surrounded by the hum of an old heater and dinners of thin soup. But my father taught me the most important thing. being poor wasn't the same as being worthless. And my mother taught me that a woman must stand on her own 2 feet. I carried those lessons throughout my life. When I married Mark, we started from nothing. Mark worked as a delivery driver for a furniture company. I got a job at a small laundromat on Main Street. The pay was small, but we saved every cent by cutting every expense possible. I became familiar with the smell of detergent, the damp chill of clothes straight out of old machines. My youth lived between heavy laundry baskets and hours of standing on aching legs. But it didn't matter, because when Madeline was born, every sacrifice became something I wanted to do. Madeline was stunning from day one. Soft brown hair, blue-gray eyes she inherited from Mark, and a smile that made me forget the scent of bleach still clinging to my hands. From the moment she could walk, we gave her everything our limited means allowed. I remember waking early to make pancakes before school, coming home from my shift and stopping by the thrift store to find her a little pink dress she would love. I wanted my daughter to grow up with what I never had, safety and enough. Madeline was brilliant. At 7, she read faster than her classmates. At 13, she won a small state science award. I cried with pride when her teacher told me, "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is exceptional." But sometimes I knew I spoiled her more than necessary. I justified it as making up for my own childhood. I thought loving more meant she would love me more. I was wrong. When she got into college, Mark and I worked harder so she wouldn't feel limited like we once did. I took on a second job cleaning offices at night. Every day I left the laundromat at 5, ate a quick sandwich, then worked until late. In winter, when snow piled thick and my back throbbed with pain, I still pushed through because I wanted her to have a future brighter than anything I could imagine. I don't remember how many hours I worked each week. I only remember holding that first $5,000 tuition bill and crying because I had actually managed to pay it. Madeline knew I worked hard, but as she settled into college life, her calls became fewer. First several a week, then once a week, then only occasionally. I understood. She was becoming independent, living the life Mark and I had worked so hard to give her. I didn't resent it, but I will never forget the day she graduated. She wore a black gown, a square cap, an honor cord around her neck. When she looked at me and Mark, she beamed, a smile I once thought I would never lose. "Mom, I did it," she said, and I cried in the middle of the campus lawn. I was proud, so proud it hurt. But pride lasted only a short while. After she started working, Madeline came home less. Her stories centered on coworkers, clients, business trips, fancy events in Columbus and Cleveland. We became background figures, appearing only during holidays. Then one day she called to say she wanted to bring her boyfriend home. I hoped he would be kind, like Mark, someone genuine, hardworking, steady. But when Andrew Whitmore stepped through the door, I knew immediately that my daughter's path had taken a sharp turn. Andrew was the type of man who believed he was above others. Expensive suit, gleaming watch, a voice polite yet cold. He shook Mark's hand with barely any pressure, then scanned our home as if assessing its monetary value. I disliked him instantly. But Madeline, she was dazzled. Her eyes lit up whenever he spoke about managing finances, his wealthy family in Chicago, vacations in the Florida Keys. I saw clearly she was mesmerized by a world we had never belonged to and had never sought. I stayed polite, joined the conversation, but felt the first needle prick at the bond between me and my daughter. The second meeting was worse. The Whitmore family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. The moment I stepped inside, I felt out of place. White tablecloths, layered wine glasses, dishes, expensive enough to cover a week of rent. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you made it." Polite words, cold tone. All dinner long, she questioned my laundromat job, not out of interest, but superiority. Andrew spoke about the family's business investments, elite social circles, exclusive events. Every sentence implied that Madeline was moving up into a world far above us. Mark tried to stay composed, but his eyes often dropped to the tablecloth, anger mixed with resignation. That night, riding home, I sat in the back seat silently asking myself, what had I created? How had I raised a child who didn't notice the disrespect from the family she was marrying into? I never found an answer. Madeline's changes came gradually but clearly. She visited less, called less. When she did come home, she talked only about Andrew, where they went, who they met, their elevated plans for the future. Not once did she ask if I was still working 2 jobs, or how my health was, or if Mark was doing all right. The distance grew, and for the first time in my motherhood, I feared losing my daughter. The turning point came when Madeline announced Andrew had proposed. I wanted to be happy, but her smile wasn't the smile I used to know. It was the smile of someone stepping into a life where we were merely shadows behind her. That was the first small crack in my heart, a crack that the sign at the wedding entrance shattered entirely. I sat on the hotel bed holding the lace handkerchief, asking myself, how did I raise her for her to remove me from her life in the most brutal way? But that question had no time for answers, because a harsher truth settled in. Today was merely the result of a long chain of hurts. Hurts I had ignored because I kept telling myself my daughter still loved me the way she once did. I didn't know then that all of this was only the beginning of deeper pain and betrayal waiting ahead. I was still leaning against the hotel headboard, gripping the lace handkerchief as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Memories of Madeline and years of raising her twisted together in my mind, carrying me toward another moment I should have recognized sooner, the first dinner with the Whitmore family. Looking back, it feels like the first chapter of a book I wish I had never opened. That afternoon, I woke earlier than usual to clean the house. I wanted our small home to look warm and tidy. I baked apple pie, Madeline's childhood favorite, thinking it might make her feel like she was coming back to the home she grew up in. I polished the wooden dining table and placed a vase of white daisies in the center. Mark went to the grocery store for extra drinks, nervously asking me, should I wear the blue shirt or the white one? I laughed and said, either one, Mark. They're coming to meet us, not interview us. He chuckled softly, but I knew he was anxious. Both of us wanted to make a good impression on the man our daughter had chosen. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded as if I were preparing for an important ceremony. Madeline walked in first, her hair softly curled, her face glowing. She gave me a quick hug, then stepped aside to introduce Andrew. Andrew wore a charcoal shirt under an expensive blazer, and his shoes were so shiny I could have seen my reflection in them. He smiled and extended his hand, but his eyes swept across my living room as if he were checking the value of every item. I had never liked that look. It wasn't the look of someone curious or wanting to know his future wife's family. It was the look of someone appraising merchandise. Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Andrew said, his voice polite, crisp, and a bit too perfectly measured. I invited them to sit and brought out the apple pie. Madeline took a bite and smiled, a rare smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. But Andrew only tasted a small piece and said, "Oh, very homey." His tone sounded both like praise and like a subtle suggestion that my baking wasn't quite up to standard. Mark glanced at me, and I just smiled as if I hadn't heard anything. But the moment I went into the kitchen to pour tea, I heard Andrew whisper to Madeline, "Too sweet. You know I don't like old-fashioned baked goods." Madeline let out a soft laugh. "Mom's been making it like that forever." I stood there behind the kitchen door for a few seconds, feeling the air around me disappear. But I walked out again, keeping my smile, convincing myself I was being oversensitive. It was the first meeting, I reminded myself, and I wanted to believe Andrew was simply a little snobbish, not a bad person. I was wrong. A week later, Andrew's family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. I had already felt uneasy when Madeline called earlier and said, "Mom, just wear something comfortable." That sentence made me anxious. Her idea of comfortable was nothing like what comfortable meant for me. I chose a simple navy dress Mark had given me for our anniversary. It wasn't brand name, but it was clean, lovely, and appropriate. Mark wore the blue shirt I had picked for him last time. We walked into the restaurant. Warm, dim lighting, soft violin music, the faint scent of wine drifting through the air. I felt like I was stepping into a world that wasn't meant for me. The Whitmore family was already seated. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked up and scanned me from head to toe. Her gaze lingered slightly too long on my shoes, then moved to Mark, then to the inexpensive handbag I was holding. "Oh," she said, lips curving faintly. "Very simple." I heard her clearly. Everyone did. But Mark gave a polite smile, and I tried not to let the heat of embarrassment rise up my cheeks. Dinner began with questions disguised as small talk, but laced with condescension. Margaret asked what I did for a living. I answered honestly. I worked at a small laundromat near our home. She raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that must be quite tiring." I knew that tone. People used it when they didn't want to openly admit they looked down on your job. Then she turned to Mark. She asked whether a delivery driver's salary was sufficient. The question carried no kindness at all, and I saw Mark's back stiffen and his hand tighten around the napkin. Meanwhile, Andrew talked about his family, about their investment companies, about parties in Chicago, about real estate projects I couldn't even understand. Every word he said felt like a reminder of the distance between their world and ours. Margaret looked at Madeline with calculated pride. "She's so smart, so beautiful. She deserves a better future, don't you think?" I knew exactly what she meant by a better future, and I knew she said it deliberately in front of me. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to make Madeline uncomfortable. Mark, unlike me, couldn't hide his emotions well. He kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with frustration and helplessness. But he restrained himself. For Madeline. For what was supposed to be a beautiful evening. A little later, Andrew took Madeline's hand, kissed the back of it, and announced, "I've proposed to Madeline. My family will take care of the entire wedding. We want a ceremony that matches our standards." Madeline nearly teared up with joy. I felt my heart beat slow, not because I wasn't happy for her, but because something inside me suddenly sharpened. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. It felt like a cold draft down my spine, like an alarm quietly going off in the back of my mind. I looked at the Whitmores, the perfect smiles, the arrogant eyes, the polished words, and I knew nothing here was genuine. Not the promises, not the generosity, not the welcome they pretended to give Madeline. And it didn't take long for that intuition to prove itself in the cruelest way possible. The days after the dinner in Columbus, the uneasiness stayed with me. It wasn't a sudden blow like lightning. It was a slow, creeping fog settling into every corner of my thoughts. I tried to deny it, telling myself my daughter was simply growing up, stepping into a world I wasn't familiar with. But then, one afternoon, Madeline came to my house. And the moment she spoke, I knew the change wasn't small anymore. I had just finished my shift at the laundromat, my hand still carrying a faint scent of detergent. Madeline walked in, dressed neatly as if she had just left an important office meeting. I invited her to sit in the kitchen, where I had prepared 2 cups of mint tea, our old habit whenever she visited. But this time, she didn't look at the tea, didn't ask if I was tired. She only leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if she were preparing for a negotiation rather than talking to her mother. "Mom," she began, her voice light as if hiding something, "Andrew's family has decided they'll cover the entire wedding cost." I forced myself to stay calm. "Oh, I see. Yes, so you and Dad don't need to worry about anything." She said it with a relieved expression, as if she had just dropped a burden she'd been carrying. But that relief pierced me. Since when had our lack of wealth become something that embarrassed her? I nodded and smiled. "If that's what you want, I won't object." Madeline hugged me briefly, then left almost immediately. When the door shut behind her, the house felt strangely cold. I stood still for a long moment, a nameless weight pressing on my chest. Something wasn't right. I picked up the phone and searched for the event planning company Madeline had mentioned the night before. When the staff answered, I tried to sound casual. "Hi, I'm the mother of the bride, Madeline Carter. I'd like to ask about the event cost." The woman quickly opened the file. "Yes, the estimated total is $92,000. But we haven't received any deposit or payment yet." I went silent. I had to take a deep breath before answering. "None at all?" "That's correct. We're waiting for the contract holder to make the transfer." When I hung up, my hands were ice cold. So the Whitmore family never planned to pay. Every generous promise had been a performance. A show meant to make Madeline feel lucky to be marrying into their world and to make her believe they were a stronger support system than the parents who raised her. I sat down, staring out at the backyard where the old maple tree stood, silent as if listening, and the only thought I had was, if they won't pay, what will happen to the wedding? And worse, did Madeline know? Or was she also a victim of their shiny lies? I couldn't let my daughter be humiliated. No matter how much she had changed, no matter how much it hurt, I was still her mother. And a mother doesn't let her child fall in front of hundreds of people. That night, I called the event planning company back. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll pay the entire cost, but one condition. Do not tell anyone, including the bride, that I am the one paying." The staff member hesitated, then agreed. I transferred the money in 3 large payments, amounts I never imagined I would spend in my lifetime. When it was done, I sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the dry ticking of the wall clock. I had emptied nearly all the savings Mark and I had built over 30 years, money meant for our peaceful retirement. But the part that hurt most wasn't the money. It was knowing that if Andrew or the Whitmores claimed later that they paid for everything, Madeline would believe them immediately without asking me a single question. In the following days, whenever Madeline called, not to check on me, but to gush about how generous Andrew's family was, my heart shrank a little more. I heard her pride in things I knew were lies. I smiled through the phone, hiding the hollow ache inside. I wanted to tell her the truth, but every time I tried, I imagined her face, bright eyes, confident voice, blind trust in the Whitmore family. I feared she'd think I was jealous, or worse, that I wanted to sabotage her wedding, so I stayed silent. I told myself her happiness was enough, that she would eventually understand my love. But as time passed, she called less. Messages became shorter. "I'm busy, Mom," or "Don't worry, I've got everything handled." I felt myself being pushed out of the very life I had built for her. Stories of the Whitmores filled the space between us. She dined with them, traveled with them, attended their exclusive parties, never once inviting me. Every photo she posted made me disappear a little more. I realized then it wasn't that their world was too big. It was that they wanted mine to become too small for her to see. One morning, while I was folding clothes at the laundromat, Mark called. Madeline had texted that she couldn't come for dinner that weekend. She had a business networking event with Andrew's family. I only said, "It's okay, don't be upset." But inside, memories of raising her scattered like fallen leaves in a storm. Distance doesn't come in one day. It arrives from many quiet moments. Moments when I convinced myself everything was fine. Moments when I ignored hurtful words. Moments when I believed motherly love was a wall that could never collapse. But the wall had already fallen, and I stood among the rubble, not knowing how to make my daughter see me the way she once did. I didn't know then that everything I had endured was only the beginning of something far more painful and far more cruel, something that would lead to the moment I was humiliated at her wedding entrance, and then to the moment I decided to reclaim the power I had given away for so many years. I remember that afternoon vividly. Gray skies, heavy clouds, hanging low over Ohio like a warning. I stood in front of Madeline's apartment door for a long time before pressing the bell. Not because I was afraid of being turned away, but because I feared hearing something that would hurt even more than what I had already suffered. But I knew I had to go. I had to talk. I had to understand what was happening to the daughter I had spent my entire life protecting. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. The door opened within 3 seconds, and instead of Madeline, it was Andrew standing there. He wore a white shirt buttoned to the collar, holding his phone like whatever conversation he'd been having was more important than anything else. When he saw me, his eyebrows tightened. Just slightly, but enough for me to understand I was not a welcome sight. "Ah, Mrs. Carter." He glanced at his watch. "Madeline didn't say you were coming today." I forced politeness into my voice. "I just want to talk to her for a moment. Just a few minutes." Andrew stepped aside, though stiffly, as if he were letting in a delivery person rather than his future mother-in-law. I walked in, trying to smile, though the coldness in that beautifully decorated apartment made me shiver. It was elegant and perfectly arranged, but missing something I couldn't name. Warmth, soul, life. Madeline came out of the bedroom holding a thick clipboard. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and she wore a sleek, smart band on her wrist. She looked at me, hesitated for a second, then said, slightly rushed, "Mom, I'm getting ready for a meeting with the wedding planner. What do you need?" A simple question, but not a hint of joy at seeing me. I forced a bright expression. "I just wanted to check if you needed any help. The wedding is coming soon." Madeline sighed. "Andrew's family is handling everything. You really don't need to worry." The way she stressed the word "they" made me pause. Still, I swallowed it down, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about our seating for the ceremony? No one from the planning team has contacted me, so I just want to be sure." Madeline glanced at Andrew as if seeking permission. Andrew shrugged, then answered for her. "There are many important guests from my family, so your table will be a standard one in the middle section. It can't be near the stage." I looked at them. 3 seconds passed, long enough to age someone. I turned to Madeline. You decided that? Madeline reluctantly nodded. Mom, there will be business people, Dad Andrew's friends. You understand, right? You and Dad still get a nice table, just not the main one. I once thought I was strong, but hearing that felt like a stone dropping onto my chest, not because of the seating, because for the first time, my daughter saw me as someone outside her life. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. And the tradition of your father walking you down the aisle? Madeline looked at Andrew again. That single glance told me everything. My daughter was no longer someone who would speak for herself. She was waiting for him to speak for her. Andrew cleared his throat. We're not doing that old giving the bride away tradition. Madeline will walk in alone. She's independent. It's modern. Madeline gave a small, awkward smile. You understand, right? I don't want to look like a traditional bride. The word traditional felt like a cold blade pressing into my chest. All those years I held on to traditions, family dinners, holidays, little routines that shaped Madeline's childhood, now dismissed as outdated burdens. I stared at my daughter, the same child who once ran through our backyard as Mark and I chased after her, the child who clung to me during nightmares, the child who cried when classmates teased her. And there she was, telling me everything I represented was an embarrassment. Why, Madeline? I asked softly. Why don't you want your father and me near you on your wedding day? She froze for only a second. Then she looked away as if searching for the kindest possible lie. It's not like that, Mom. It's just, there are certain images we need to present at the wedding. You know, Andrew's family does big business. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I heard the meaning behind every word. I understood that we, Mark and I, did not fit the image my daughter wanted to display. I took a deep breath. Let me ask you one thing, Madeline. Do you still see your father and me as family? Madeline grew uneasy and turned away. Andrew stood right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, as if both comforting her and asserting control. Mom, don't make this a big deal, Madeline said. I'm very busy. Busy. One simple word, yet it drew a clear line between us. I found myself standing in my own daughter's apartment, feeling like every decoration and every color on the walls whispered the same message. You don't belong here anymore. I nodded. I understand. I turned around. Andrew didn't walk me out, and Madeline didn't follow. When the door closed behind me, I stood in the cold, bright hallway, my hands trembling, and then I cried. Not the angry, heaving kind of cry. It was the cry of someone stripped of the most sacred place she'd ever held in life, the place of being a mother. I cried so hard I didn't hear the elevator open. Mark was waiting for me in the car. When I got in, he saw my swollen eyes and didn't ask anything. He simply placed his hand over mine, lightly, but enough for me to feel the grief spreading through every part of me. I leaned my head against the window, watching the blur of cars outside. The air inside the car felt heavy as lead. Mark spoke softly. Evelyn, don't let her hurt you like this. I know how much you love her, but maybe she's not the little girl she used to be. I nodded without looking at him. But I still hope on her wedding day she'll realize how unreasonable she's been. I still want to believe that. Mark gently squeezed my hand. Hope is the last thing we should let go of. But deep in my heart, I knew that hope was already cracking. I felt like I was clinging to a rope that was fraying strand by strand, held together only by fragile belief. I didn't know that. Just days later, that same daughter would leave me standing before a wedding gate, staring at a picture that barred me from entering, and the heartbreak of this afternoon would become the final warning I failed to heed. 1 week before the wedding, when, under normal circumstances, I should have been counting down the hours until my daughter stepped into a new chapter, Madeline called me. I remember clearly. I was in the kitchen, just lifting the lid off a pot of chicken soup when the ICO phone buzzed. Her voice sounded calm, but underneath that calmness was something sharp, something only a mother who'd grown accustomed to disappointment could detect. "Mom," she said quickly, as if she had another meeting waiting. "I need your help with something." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "All right, go ahead." And then, with one single sentence, she delivered a blow so staggering that even now, when I remember it, my chest feels hollowed out. "Mom, can you cut everyone from our side of the guest list? Andrew's family guests are increasing. I need to prioritize people. Important for my future." I froze. The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a small but echoing clang that filled the quiet kitchen like the toll of a bell. I couldn't speak for several seconds. I just stood there, trying to register what my daughter had asked of me. "Madeline," I whispered, my voice trembling like a child's first lie. "Cut? Everyone?" But they already received their invitations. "We double-checked," Madeline replied, still breezy. "Your list has a lot of people who really don't have anything to do with my new life. They don't serve any purpose for me and Andrew." It felt like a slap across my face, not because she wanted to cut guests, but because of how she spoke about the very people who had helped me raise her through the hardest years, the ones who brought over cans of soup when money was tight, who babysat her when I worked double shifts, who treated her like family though we shared no blood. "You're saying they don't serve any purpose for your future?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like it was blocked with stone. Madeline sighed as if I was the difficult one. "Mom, don't make this heavy. It's my wedding. I want everything perfect. Andrew's family has a lot of important connections. You know that. I can't seat his father's business partners next to our relatives from Dayton. It just wouldn't look right." My hand began to shake. "But they're our family, sweetheart." Madeline went silent for a few seconds. Then she dropped the sentence that shoved me off the cliff. "Family has limits too, Mom. You understand that." No, I did not understand. I had always believed sacrifice was the language of motherhood, that if I loved her enough, she would know. But in that moment, I realized some children, when placed under glittering lights, forget the warm lamps that once kept them safe. Madeline continued, brisk and decisive. "Please notify everyone. Just tell them there's a seating issue. Make it sound polite for me." I leaned against the counter because without it, I might have collapsed. I couldn't believe this was the same little girl who once clung to my leg and cried when another child refused to share a toy. "All right," I whispered. "I'll take care of it." There was no "thank you," no hesitation, just a quick, "good, I'm busy, Mom." And then the line went dead. I looked around the kitchen, the towel, the chicken soup, the spoon on the floor. Everything seemed familiar, yet I no longer recognized myself. That night, I called each relative, my cousin, my 2 nieces, my elderly aunt in Cincinnati, Uncle Harold's family, people who had never once missed any milestone in our lives. And each time I had to repeat the lie, "Oh, it's just a seating issue. We have to cut back. Please understand." Every voice on the other end carried disappointment softened by kindness. "It's all right, Evelyn, as long as she's happy." I bit my lip until I tasted blood just to stop myself from crying on the phone. When I hung up after the last call, I couldn't hold back any longer. I set the phone down and let the tears fall. Not just tears of hurt, but of betrayal over how my daughter had trampled every value that once held our family together. Mark heard me crying and rushed in from the living room. He held me without asking because he already knew. He had seen the distance growing every day. I pressed my face into his shoulder, my voice breaking. "Mark, she said our family doesn't serve any purpose for her future." Mark closed his eyes, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting, but you don't deserve this. You don't." I shook my head, tears falling on his shirt like ink stains. "What if we tell her the truth? You paid all $92,000. She wouldn't disrespect us like this if she knew," Mark said plainly. I stayed silent for a long time. Then I shook my head. "No, not now. If she finds out I paid, she'll shame herself in front of her new family. She'll think I did it to pressure her or out of jealousy. I don't want that." Mark looked at me, his eyes a mix of worry and heartbreak. "But if you keep letting her treat you like this..." I cut in softly. "On her wedding day, she'll see me there. She'll realize how wrong she's been. I believe that. The wedding will be the moment she understands." I said it, but deep down I knew that hope was fragile. So fragile that the slightest breeze could shatter it. I wanted to believe in my daughter so badly it made me foolish. I wanted to think that somewhere inside her there was still room for me. That night I cried until I was exhausted, until my eyes burned. I fell asleep with that tiny, flickering hope that the wedding would mend what had been broken. But I was wrong. When the wedding day arrived, I fixed my silvering hair, put on the navy dress Mark loved most, and held the small gift I'd wrapped all week. I stepped out of the hotel with my heart full of hope. Hope that my daughter would see me, smile, and run to hug me like she used to. Instead, when Mark and I stepped up to the garden gate, under the soft glow of golden lights, a massive sign greeted us. On it was our picture, and the bold, slicing words, "Do not let these two in, bride's orders." In that moment, the last drop of hope inside me was crushed into dust, and I, someone who once believed love was enough, stood there learning how to breathe again after having my heart shattered. I don't remember how I got back to the hotel. I only remember sitting stiffly in the car, hands trembling in my lap, unable to process any of it. Mark placed his hand on my back, rubbing slow circles, but the hollow ache in my chest didn't ease. It wasn't a pain of the body. It was deeper, hollowing. When Mark closed the door behind us, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my freezing hands, and like a string pulled too tight, finally snapping, I broke into sobs, not soft sobs, choking ones, the kind that makes breathing impossible. Humiliation, grief, betrayal, confusion, everything crashed over me at once. Mark sat beside me, holding on to my shoulders. "Evelyn, we don't need to stay here. I'll pack our bags. We'll leave right now. We'll go home. Forget this ever happened." I wanted to nod. I wanted to say, "Yes, let's go." But inside me was a strange emptiness, as if I had lost a part of myself, and leaving now felt like admitting my daughter had the right to hurt me without consequence. I tried to inhale, but the breath dissolved before reaching my chest. "Mark, I don't know what to do." He stroked my hair. "We'll go home. You don't need to take any more of this." I was about to answer when my phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. Ohio area code, but not saved in my contacts. Mark gestured for me not to pick up, but something, I couldn't name what, made me reach for the phone. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice rough. A young woman's shaky voice came through, someone who seemed to have struggled before deciding to call. "Mrs. Carter? Is this you? My name is Chelsea Rivera. I'm one of the event coordinators at the Linden Garden tonight." I blinked. "Chelsea? I don't think we've met." "I know," she said. I heard her swallow, then her voice quickened. "But I saw what happened at the gate. I was standing inside when they put the sign up. I'm so sorry I witnessed it and couldn't do anything." I gripped the phone, my palms dampening. "You're calling because of that?" "Not just because of that, Mrs. Carter." Her voice dropped, trembling slightly. "I'm calling because I know you're the one who paid for the entire wedding tonight." My fingers went numb. How do you know that?" I asked, my voice almost colorless. "Because I checked the contracts before the event. Every receipt, every payment record, every signature, everything has your name on it. You're the only one who paid in full. There isn't a single cent from the Whitmore family." My heart thudded so hard I pressed my hand against my chest. A long stretch of silence passed between two breaths. Chelsea continued, her voice thick with hesitation. "And there's something else you should know." I heard her swallow again, as if bracing herself. 2 hours before the ceremony, I walked past the bridal suite. I overheard the bride and the Whitmore family talking. They were talking about you. The air around me froze. "Chelsea? What did they say?" Her voice trembled, but each word stabbed like a blade. "They called you trashy and poor. They mocked you for trying to act classy. They said the wedding would be less embarrassing if you didn't show up." My knees buckled, and I sank onto the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. Chelsea pressed on, her voice full of pity. "I saw the bride, Madeline, smile when they talked about the no entry sign. They said it would solve the problem once and for all." Mark heard enough to rush over and hold me, but I couldn't feel his warmth. I only heard Chelsea's voice, small but sharp as broken glass. "Mrs. Carter, I can't stay quiet, not when I know the truth. You have the right to cancel the entire event, all of it, because you paid for it, and you can do it at any moment tonight." I opened my eyes. The hotel room spun around me. I have that right?" I asked, sounding like a stranger to myself. "Yes, you're the contract holder. If you request the sound to stop, the lights to go off, the service to end, we have to obey immediately." For a moment I heard nothing but the rush of blood in my ears, like waves hitting rock. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel. Power. Not the power of money, the power of truth, the power of justice. The power that comes when someone is pushed so low that standing back up becomes its own form of strength. "Mrs. Carter," Chelsea asked, "are you still there?" I placed a hand over my chest, because for the first time in months, my heart wasn't just aching, it was awakening. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm here." "Would you like me to send over the document confirming your right to terminate the event?" I looked at Mark. He was watching me as if asking, "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" But I couldn't answer him. Not yet. Not when a door inside me, one I had always kept locked, was opening wider with every second. Chelsea spoke again, her voice steady and sincere. "Mrs. Carter, I know you're a good person, but sometimes good people need protection from those who take advantage of their kindness." I inhaled slowly, and an idea, terrifying but perfectly logical, began to take shape in my mind, a thought that the version of me from a few years ago would have trembled at and pushed away immediately. But the version of me now? I had been pushed to the very edge. I had been humiliated in front of strangers. I had been stripped of my place as a mother by my own daughter. I had been trampled on by people who saw me as nothing but weeds in their lives. And now, when Chelsea spoke her final sentence, "You just have to say the word, one word," I understood that my kindness had been stepped on one time too many. I understood that some lessons can only be taught through silence, and some lessons can only be taught through action. And I, the gentle mother who had endured all her life, began to see with painful clarity the path I had to take next. No more trembling, no more weakness, only one decision, cold, rational, and entirely mine. After hanging up with Chelsea, I sat still for a long time, still enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint traffic far below. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting softly on my knee, like a thread keeping me attached to reality. But inside, I knew I had just crossed a line I could never return from. "Evelyn," Mark whispered, "what are you thinking?" I lifted my head and looked straight into his eyes. For the first time throughout this ordeal, I no longer said, "I don't know." "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that it's time she understands that actions have consequences, not through words, through the one thing she's clinging to, this wedding." Mark was silent. He didn't rush to comfort me, nor did he try to dissuade me. He simply looked at me for a long time, then nodded, heavy, reluctant. "So, what are you planning to do?" I inhaled deeply and picked up my phone. My fingers still trembled slightly, but this time out of adrenaline, not fear. I opened the contact card Chelsea had sent. The hotel manager, Mr. Harris. I made the call. The phone rang a few times before a polite middle-aged man answered. "Good evening. This is Christopher Harris, manager at the Linden Garden. How may I help you?" "This is Evelyn Carter," I said plainly, "the person listed on all contracts for tonight's wedding. I need to confirm a few things." His tone shifted immediately, becoming more careful. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Carter. I have your file right here." I heard the shuffle of papers and the tapping of a keyboard. My heart beat steadily now, not fast, not erratic. For the first time, I felt myself speaking without bowing my head, without asking for permission. "I want to know," I said clearly, "whose name appears on every contract related to tonight's wedding, the venue, decor, catering, sound, and lighting." "Let me check," Mr. Harris replied. A few seconds later, he continued. "All contracts are under your name, Mrs. Carter. Every payment we received came from your account. There is no Whitmore name on any document." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Hearing what I already knew, but from someone with authority, made it feel heavier, more final. "In that case," I continued, "legally, the person who has the right to cancel or stop all services during the event is me, correct?" A pause, then a quiet exhale. "Under contract principles, yes, Mrs. Carter. If you request that services stop, we must comply. But I must warn you, that would cause significant disruption." "I understand," I cut in calmly. "I am not asking you to do it now. I simply need you to confirm that if I call back and request all music, service, lighting, and venue use to stop, you will do so, correct?" There was something like respect, maybe even fear in his voice when he responded, "Yes, Mrs. Carter. If you, as the paying client, request it, I will proceed. But I hope you consider this carefully." "I already have," I replied. "One more thing. I want every decision, communication, and adjustment tonight documented. Emails, internal notes, all of it must have a clear trail." "Of course," he said. We will email you a confirmation. It will state clearly that you are the one requesting service termination." "Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said, my voice low. "I may call again tonight. When I do, I expect everything to follow what you've just confirmed." "I understand, Mrs. Carter," he answered, "and I'm sorry for what happened at the gate. No mother deserves that." I didn't address the last sentence. I simply said, "Have a memorable evening," and ended the call. Mark stared at me, eyes wide. "Evelyn, you're really going to do it?" I turned to him. "Do you think I have another choice? She dragged me to the lowest point she could find. If I stay silent, I'm only teaching her that she can trample others without consequences." Mark put his arm around my shoulders. "I won't stop you. I'm only hurting because I know tonight will be the final nail in the door between you and her." I nodded softly. "That door? It's been locked for a long time, Mark. I just refuse to admit it." I straightened up and pulled my laptop closer. The light from the screen reflected off my tired, calloused hands. I opened a new email, typing with a calmness that almost frightened me. Recipient: Margaret Whitmore, Andrew's mother. Subject: regarding your family's generosity for tonight's wedding. I began, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, this is Evelyn Carter, the bride's mother. First, thank you for proudly telling everyone that your family covered all the wedding expenses. That must feel wonderful for you. Attached are all contracts, invoices, and bank payment receipts in case you'd like to refresh your memory. In case it has escaped your attention, every dollar of the $92,000 spent on tonight's wedding was paid by me. Not you, not Andrew, not anyone named Whitmore. If you'd still like to boast about your family's generosity tonight, feel free to do so, with full understanding of the truth. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter." I attached everything: hotel invoices, transfer receipts, contracts bearing my signature, even the PDF bank, statements I downloaded earlier, irrefutable. I didn't send it yet. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 8:30 p.m., just when everyone would be seated, the dinner service underway, and the Whitmores likely bragging loudly. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. There was still one more thing. I found my sister's contact, Linda Carter, the one who stood by me through the hardest years, the one Madeline erased from the guest list without hesitation. I called her. "Sis?" Linda answered after 2 rings. "I've been waiting for your call. How is everything over there?" I paused, then asked, "Are you home?" "Yes, we're all having dinner. We keep wondering how the wedding is going. I didn't want to bother you." I swallowed. "Linda, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to stay calm when you hear what I'm about to say." Her tone changed instantly. "Don't scare me. What happened?" I told her. Every detail, from paying the entire wedding cost, to Madeline cutting the whole family from the list, to the sign with our picture banning us from entering. Linda didn't speak. I heard rushed breathing, a chair scraping back, someone in her house asking, "What's wrong?" and then silence. When I finished, Linda exhaled shakily, so deeply I heard the strain in her ribs. "Sis," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please don't tell me you're still there. I'm at a hotel nearby, but Linda, I didn't call just to vent. I need you to do something." "Anything," she said immediately. "Tell me." "I need you to call every single relative Madeline erased from the list. Tell them the truth. Tell them I paid for everything. Tell them she banned her own parents at the door. Tell them she said our family serves no purpose for her future." Silence. I knew Linda was hold-her-back fury. "You want them to know?" she finally asked. I I said softly, that when Madeline spins her story later, our family already knows the truth. I'm not asking them to storm the wedding. I just don't want them carrying shame on my behalf anymore. Linda inhaled sharply. All right, I'll do it. I swear, by tonight our whole family will know who has heart and who threw it away. Her voice softened. Sis, I'm sorry I'm not there with you right now. I gave a faint, tired smile. You are here, just in a different way. We ended the call. Staring at my phone, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Even if Madeline cut herself off, the people who walked with me through hardship still stood firmly by my side. And tonight, I wouldn't let anyone, not even my daughter, cut that bond again. One last task remained before the moment of reckoning. I opened another file, a draft of my will I had prepared with my attorney in Ohio. I had planned to revise it after the wedding, adding Madeline more clearly as a beneficiary. Now, there was no need. I called my attorney, Mr. Jackson. Evelyn, I thought you'd be at the wedding tonight, he said, surprised. I'm still here, I replied, but something has changed. I need to revise my will immediately, at least the draft and email confirmation before Monday. He shifted into professional tone quickly. All right, tell me what you'd like to update. I spoke firmly. I want Madeline Carter removed from all inheritance. The house, savings, life insurance, my small share in the laundromat, everything. I want it reassigned to Mark and then, if Mark passes before me, transferred to a charity fund supporting older women in hardship. He paused. Are you certain, Evelyn? This is a significant decision. Tonight, I said, I received the clearest answer about what I mean to her. I'm not punishing her, Mr. Jackson. I'm simply placing her where she's chosen to be, outside the center of my life. He exhaled heavily. I'll draft the changes and send them to you for review. Come in Monday for final signatures. Thank you, I said, and please keep this confidential. Of course, he replied. Evelyn, this isn't cruelty. Sometimes protecting yourself is a form of love too, painful as it is. I closed the laptop. The hotel room felt like a temporary fortress, a place where I was gathering the scattered pieces of my dignity and rebuilding them into one final barrier. Mark had watched everything silently. He didn't interrupt, didn't protest. He sat at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Mark, I turned to him, if I go through with this, will you resent me? He looked at me for a long moment. His tired eyes were sincere. I've watched you endure more than any woman I know. If tonight is the night you stand up for yourself, I will stand with you. I hurt for her, but I hurt for you far more. I rested my head on his shoulder. Tonight, Madeline's life will change. And so will ours, Mark murmured. In a way, we'll both be freed. I opened my laptop again, not to send more messages or make more calls. I went into my storage folder and gathered every piece of evidence: contracts, invoices, bank statements, screenshots of messages, the email confirmation with the hotel, the new will draft. I placed them all into one folder named Truth. I copied it onto a small silver USB drive I always kept in my purse, then uploaded a duplicate to a private email account meant only for backups. If one day I was no longer here, there would still be enough truth to silence any lies. When everything was finally in place, I looked at the clock. 7:50 p.m. Surely by now, Madeline was standing in the ceremony hall, her hand in Andrew's, smiling in front of 300 guests, believing tonight was the most perfect night of her life, believing she had completely removed two poor nobodies from the flawless picture she wanted to present. She didn't know, couldn't even imagine, that every light above her, every piece of music playing, every chair she and her groom sat on, all depended on one phone call from the mother whose photo she had just posted at the entrance with a ban. And tonight, I would make her understand something she had never learned in her entire life. No one can build their happiness on humiliating the person who gave birth to them and raised them without paying a price. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I opened them again, staring straight at my phone screen where Mr. Harris's number still sat in my call history. I didn't call right away. I left a pause. A pause for myself to confirm one last time that this wasn't from impulse or anger. This was the decision of a woman pushed to her final limits, who had thought, endured, forgiven far too many times, and was now choosing to stand on her own side. When that pause ended, I knew it was time. I tightened my grip on the phone and waited for the perfect moment to destroy the wedding I had spent my entire life paying for, only to receive the rawest betrayal in return. Chelsea sent the update just as the clock struck 8:10. "They're all seated, Mrs. Carter. The appetizers will be brought out in a few minutes." Her voice was small but full of meaning. I understood. This was the exact right moment. I set the phone down for a moment. Mark was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, silently looking down at the dim parking lot. When I walked toward him, he turned, his eyes heavy but steady. "Evelyn, are you sure?" I didn't answer with words. I simply took his hand. That hand had guided me through so many hardships, but tonight it became the support I needed to walk into the most decisive moment of my life as a mother. I pressed the call button. Mr. Harris picked up immediately, as if he had been waiting for every second. "Mrs. Carter?" I drew a deep breath. "It's time." No questions, just one crisp reply. "Yes, ma'am. We'll proceed immediately." I set the phone down. Inside me, a strange emptiness spread. A feeling like closing a door that had been open for decades, a door I had never believed I would have the courage to shut. Only a few minutes later, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Chelsea texted, "The sound is off. Everyone is confused. The bride is looking around, panicking." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene inside the venue. The main hall of the Linden Garden, once glowing with warm golden lights, soft background music, elegant table settings, was now swallowed by sudden silence. More than 300 guests, business people, the Whitmore family's partners, friends, relatives from far away, all lifted their heads, looking around, not understanding what was happening. Some laughed, thinking it was part of a performance. Others whispered, irritation clearly on their faces. Then the second text arrived. "The decorative lights are off. Only the emergency lights are on. People are standing up, chaotic." I opened my eyes. Mark watched me, his face reflecting the dim light from my phone. "It started," I whispered. In my mind, I pictured the bright lights going out row by row. From the ceiling down the sides of the hall, the sparkling strings of lights, the ones Madeline had said must look cinematic, now nothing more than dark pieces of glass. Under the cold white glow of emergency lighting, everyone's panic was more visible. Unease seeped into every whisper. These guests, so used to polished, high-class events, were now looking at each other with confusion and irritation. Chelsea texted, "The staff have stopped service. They're all standing still on command. No appetizers are going out." I pictured the young waitstaff in their neat black and white uniforms, standing frozen like statues. No smiles, no polite bows, no champagne refills. And in a luxury wedding, that alone was a loud signal that something enormous was happening. An older guest likely lost patience, standing up and shouting, "What is going on? Get the manager here immediately!" Chairs scraped, voices rose, heels clicked on tile, a storm of noise swelling in the hall, all surging toward Madeline, my daughter, standing in the center like someone stripped of her crown in front of everyone. Chelsea's fourth text came, "Madeline is standing in the center, pale. She's asking the staff who authorized this. No one is answering." I could imagine her face. The same daughter who once beamed with joy on her college graduation day, who once ran to hug me when she got her first job. Now trembling, eyes wide with terror. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand, because she believed power and wealth were what controlled the world. She forgot one thing. Tonight, every glass, every rose, every strip of silk was paid for with my money. The fifth message arrived, longer. "Andrew is yelling at the staff. He says he'll call his lawyer. But Manager Harris just walked in. He showed Andrew the contract and pointed at the name, yours." I stared at the screen, unusually calm. Some truths don't require shouting, just a signature. I pictured Andrew grabbing the contract, reading my name on every page, then perhaps looking around, searching for backup from his family. But the truth was too clear, too sharp, leaving no one able to save him from the humiliation spreading across the hall like spilled oil. Then Chelsea sent, "Mrs. Whitmore, she opened your email." I sat upright. My heart beat lightly but steadily, no twisting pain now. Mark leaned toward me, almost holding his breath. Then the final message in that sequence appeared. "She's frozen. Her hands are shaking. Her face is white. People beside her are asking what's wrong." She handed her phone to her husband. He looked at it, then looked at Andrew, like he wants to crush him. I exhaled, a long breath I had been holding for weeks. The Whitmore family, who mocked me, looked down on me, orchestrated my humiliation at the gate, lost their dignity in just a few minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. Truly, I didn't feel joy reading those texts. What rose inside me wasn't arrogant victory, but deep relief. Like finally, the truth had been forced to speak after being buried so long. I imagined Margaret Whitmore standing at her table, hands shaking, reading each invoice, each contract I sent. Every paid by Evelyn Carter, cutting into her pride like cold metal. I imagined Andrew turning to the bride, my daughter, just as stunned. His pride ripped away in front of 300 people. And I knew, at that very moment, the Whitmores finally understood something they never expected. The woman they humiliated was the only reason they had the wedding that was now falling apart before their eyes. Then Chelsea texted a sentence that made my hand pause above the screen. "Madeline is crying. She's asking, who did this?" I stared at the words, my heart tightening. My daughter was crying. That moment didn't make me waver, but it did bring a sharp ache to the part of me that was still a mother. I had given birth to her. I had raised her through the hardest years. And now I was the one pulling the cloth off the truth at the wedding she treated as her life's dream. But I didn't regret it. I had been silent too long. I had let her believe there were no consequences. I had let myself be treated as an extra in the life I built for her. If tonight she had to stand under cold emergency lighting, facing 300 questioning eyes, then that was the only lesson she would listen to. I put the phone down. Mark squeezed my shoulder. "Are you all right?" I nodded, and for the first time my eyes were no longer wet. All right, for the first time. Truly all right. Outside the window, the lights of Ohio shimmered like quiet dots, as if reminding me that life was bigger than the pain Madeline caused. And in that rare moment, I knew. The storm I unleashed wasn't to destroy her. It was to let her see what she had lost by letting arrogance lead her. Tonight the lights at the wedding went out, but the light inside me, for the first time in a long while, turned back on. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, my heart settling like calm water after the strongest wind of my life, when my phone vibrated violently. The screen lit up with the caller's name, Madeline. I stared at it for a long time. Mark stood behind me, his eyes gentle but sad, as if he knew exactly what I was about to face. When I pressed answer, I heard my daughter's ragged breaths, the chaotic noise behind her, people shouting, management being called, chairs scraping. Then Madeline burst into tears, sobbing, Mom, please help me." I closed my eyes, not from pain, but because I realized I had been waiting for this call, not out of satisfaction, but out of closure. "Madeline," I said, my voice strangely calm, "there's nothing to save." It was as if she had been struck in the chest. "What do you mean?" A minute ago, everything was normal. Then suddenly, the lights went off, the staff left, the email came. Everyone is looking at me like you lied to them, I said. Like you made up a story about your in-laws' generosity. Like you turned your own mother into a poor maid to be kept outside the gate. Madeline sniffled, her voice shrinking. "Mom, I didn't think it would end up like this. I just wanted everything to look perfect. The Whitmore family, they have very high standards, and I spoke softly, but not gently. You put their standards above your own family, above your parents, above the mother who kept you alive through the hardest years of your life." Silence, only her quiet sobbing. I continued, "Madeline, do you remember you told me to cut all our relatives because they did nothing for your future? You banned us from the ceremony area to preserve the image. You allowed them to hang a sign banning your own parents at the entrance." "No. Mom, you also said," I emphasized, "that you were ashamed people would know your mother once worked at a laundromat. Do you remember that?" Madeline's breath hitched, like she couldn't get air. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said, "and you never apologized." Behind her voice, I heard someone yank the phone. Andrew's voice exploded, angry and arrogant. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You ruined our wedding, you—" "No," I cut in, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "I only turned off the things I paid for, the things your family took credit for without paying a single cent." "You're insane," Andrew yelled. "You'll pay for this. I'll sue you for causing serious damages." I laughed softly, a thin paper-like sound. It silenced him for several seconds. "Sue me?" I asked. "You're going to sue me because I turned off the sound, the lights, and the service at the wedding I paid for." "Do you want to review the contract, Andrew? My name is on every line. I paid every invoice. I have the right to stop everything at any moment. And," I spoke slowly, "I also have audio files of you bragging to your friends that your family paid for everything, that the bride's side is dirt poor." I heard Andrew choke up, then the sound of him muttering a curse. You will pay for this." "No," I said. "My daughter is the one who will pay, not me." Madeline grabbed the phone back, breathing hard like she had been running, her voice shaking violently. "Mom, please stop. I'm begging you." That plea, if it had been 2 weeks earlier, I might have burst into tears. But now I saw one very clear truth. She only begged when she was exposed, not when she did wrong. "Madeline, I said, my voice lowering, almost a whisper. Today, I did not ruin your wedding. You ruined it yourself. You belittled your parents. You deceived your guests. You built your dream on humiliating the people who raised you, and you thought you would never have to pay for it. Mom, please. Don't say that. This, I said, is a lesson about consequences. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but you will never forget tonight. Behind her, I heard hundreds of guests murmuring, people calling for staff, Mrs. Whitmore raising her voice at someone, Andrew slamming his hand on a table. Everything, like the distant echo of a world I had just stepped out of and had no intention of returning to. Madeline sobbed so hard she could barely form words. I need you. Right now, I don't know what to do. You did not need me, I said. When you erased me from your life, when you hung that sign, when you were ashamed of where you came from, so now you must stand on your own feet. Mom, I closed my eyes and said the final sentence I knew would carve itself into this night like a cut. I cannot save someone who does not want to save herself. I lowered the phone from my ear. Mom! Her voice cracked with panic. Don't hang up. I'm begging you. I didn't let her finish. I pressed the end call button. The screen returned to silence. But I didn't stop there. I opened settings and blocked all calls and messages from Madeline, from Andrew, and from the entire Whitmore family. When I set the phone down, I felt Mark place his hand on my back. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed my shoulder. A squeeze strong enough to tell me I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time in many years, I pulled the blanket over myself and laid my head on the pillow without feeling my heart sink. I didn't toss and turn, replaying painful words in my head. I didn't think about the sign at the gate. I didn't think about Madeline's face. I didn't think about the chaos at the party. I only thought one thing. At last, I had stepped out of the cycle of endurance that once felt endless, and I slept. A deep, peaceful sleep, without dreams, without heaviness. The best sleep I had had in many years. 6 months passed since that night the lights went out. A night I still remember in every detail, not because of pain, but because it marked the moment I walked out of a life I had trapped myself in for far too long. Time didn't blur the memory. Instead, it revealed the truth of everything, especially of people. Rumors about the failed wedding spread faster than anything I had ever seen. In the first weeks, a local paper even ran a mocking piece about a luxurious wedding plunged into darkness, though they didn't know half the truth behind it. Guests traded stories in half-whispered loops, and the Whitmore name, once their badge of honor, started being spoken with disdain. In the local business community, their reputation nearly collapsed. The gossip circled around how they borrowed prestige, showed off, and lived off someone else's money. Andrew's mother, Margaret, who once walked into every event with the arrogance of someone who owned the room, now appeared far less often. And when she did, people said she bowed her head more than she lifted it. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of this. Every downfall has its own cost, and I never wished for others to pay just so I could be happy. But I understood that some lessons in life are only learned through loss. As for Madeline and Andrew, they were still married. The wedding became a joke, but the marriage license was still valid. Yet their lives were nothing like the luxury they once imagined. The Whitmore family cut off all financial support, blaming the wedding scandal for embarrassing them. Andrew lost some key partners. With his reputation stained, he walked into meetings with a much lower posture than before. No one said it outright, but they understood. A man who cannot stand on his own will never earn real respect. Madeline, from what I heard, struggled to keep even a sliver of her image in her husband's family. She had to start working earlier than she planned. She had to track expenses, measure every part of their budget. No more fancy dinners, no more expensive clothing, no more luxury weekend trips, and no more respect from the Whitmores. The same people who once praised her when she first met Andrew now looked at her like an outsider. They saw her as the faint shadow of a mistake. And Madeline tried to hold herself together, but she grew more worn and frail by the day. One early June afternoon, with summer wind blowing across the porch, I was watering my pots of sunflowers when I heard a car stop at the gate. Mark was in his office. Only I stepped out. A worn sedan door opened, and Madeline got out. She had noticeably lost weight. Her once shiny blonde hair was dry and split, tied in a rush. Her clothes were no longer the elaborate style she used to prefer. Her face carried dark circles, her eyes tired as though she had cried through many nights. She stood at the gate, looking at me like someone staring at a stranger she no longer knew how to approach. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, "can you come outside and talk to me for a moment?" I opened the gate but held my distance, not coldly, but enough for her to know the past could not be erased like chalk. Madeline burst into tears immediately, as if my presence alone unlocked everything she had held back for months. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore." She fell to her knees right on the gravel path, burying her face in her hands. "I lost everything. Everything. I have no one to talk to. I have no one on my side anymore. Please, Mom, forgive me. I need you." I leaned down and set my hand lightly on her shoulder, but didn't rush to comfort her. "Madeline," I said slowly, "you didn't lose me. You only lost the right to assume I would endure forever." She looked up, her red eyes filled with hope. "Mom, I'll do anything. I just need you to hold me, just once." My heart ached with the instinct of a mother. I had wilted for years out of fear of losing her, but today I understood something else. Love does not mean allowing someone to hurt you endlessly. Sometimes love means standing far enough away for them to see their own mistakes. "Madeline," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something people receive by asking. Forgiveness is something they earn through action. I'm not closing the door on you, but I won't open it all the way just because of a tearful apology." She went still. In the past, whenever I spoke gently, Madeline often answered with a pout or an irritated tone, but today she only bowed her head. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll come back when I deserve to." She stood, wiped her tears with her sleeve, and as she walked away, her figure shrinking down the familiar road, she looked like a child realizing for the first time that the world did not revolve around her. 1 month after that, Mark and I sold the business. The laundromat that had been our family's livelihood for 30 years had become a symbol of the life I had stepped out of. We sold it to a sweet young couple who promised to keep the shop's name out of respect for the generations who built it. With the money, we moved into a small home near the beaches of North Carolina. The sound of waves every evening made me feel as though I was getting back breaths that life had taken from me for too long. I met with my lawyer again. This time, not in pain or anger, but clarity. The new will was adjusted. All assets would be transferred to a fund supporting older women seeking independence after leaving toxic families. Not a single dollar would go to Madeline, unless she proved through time and consistent action that she had changed. Mr. Jackson nodded after reading it. "Evelyn, This is not the decision of a cold mother. This is the decision of someone who finally knows how to love in the right way. I knew he was right. The most surprising part was what happened after everything fell apart. My family, the same people Madeline erased from her guest list, returned to me more than ever. Linda called me every week. The little nieces and nephews sent hand-drawn letters of the ocean, asking when they could visit. Old friends stopped by, filling the house with laughter. And I realized that the people who truly loved me had never left. I had simply been blinded by the love I poured into a child who didn't value it. One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink into the sea, the deep orange fading into soft purple. Mark said, "Do you feel lighter now?" I nodded. Not just lighter, I feel free. For the first time in years. Free from expectations, free from the fear of losing my child, free from feeling I had to be endlessly good just to be loved, free to live the life I spent too many years building for others. And as the ocean breeze brushed past me, I closed my eyes and smiled, not because the past was beautiful, but because I knew I had stepped into the most beautiful part of my own life. From the porch overlooking the sea each evening, I realize life has moments that force us to look deeply at ourselves. I once believed that if I loved my child unconditionally, every wound could be forgiven. But love without respect is just a shackle wrapped in pretty paper. It makes us forget ourselves, shrink ourselves, sacrifice until we break, and still never be enough. I spent too many years living that way. Now looking back, I understand that leaving someone you love is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the only way to save yourself from drowning. It hurts, yes, but not every pain is bad. Some pain opens a door. And for me, that door was the night the wedding lights went out. Since the day Madeline came begging for forgiveness and then quietly left, I haven't received another call or message. But strangely, my heart no longer waits, no longer hopes for an explanation, no longer hopes for anything that might drag me back into the fragile woman I used to be. Some relationships can only heal when both sides try. If only one side looks back, apologizes, or repairs. That is not family. That is a spiral of exhaustion. I do not hate Madeline. Even though I close the door, my heart still hopes that someday, not through tears or apologies, but through long-term change and real actions, she will show me she's grown. But if that day never comes, I will not hurt anymore. I have already saved myself. Now every morning I walk along the beach, picking up a few shells still wet from the tide, listening to the waves like a lullaby from a new life. In the afternoon, I sit at the nearby community center, talking with older women trapped in toxic families, women who were once versions of me. I listen to them cry, then quietly offer them the courage I paid a very high price to find. I realized that the most meaningful thing in my life wasn't paying for a wedding or putting my child through college, but helping other women see their worth. The thing I once desperately wished someone would help me see. Anyone who writes, leaves a message, or asks me to share my story, I read everything. Each note reminds me I am not alone, and none of us ever truly are. Family. I learned this far too late, but just in time, is not necessarily made of blood. Family is the people who stay when you fall. Family is the ones who never make you feel small. Family is the ones who speak your name with kindness, not contempt. And now, as you sit somewhere listening to this story, I want to ask you something sincere. Where are you listening from? And have you ever felt overlooked by your own family or had to stand up to protect your dignity. If you have, I hope you leave a few words in the comments, not for me, but for the other women who read them, the ones still suffering silently so they know they are not alone. Thank you, truly thank you, for being here, for listening to the journey of an ordinary mother like me. Every minute you spend with this story matters to me more than you can imagine. And if you want to continue walking with me with stories about the quiet strength of middle-aged and older women, then please follow the channel and leave a like. It isn't an obligation. It's simply a way of saying you're still here and that stories of healing like this still have a place in your heart. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I wish you peace, and I hope you too will find your own freedom.